Hello, and welcome to API Chronicles Unlocking the Future, which is a live celebrations of all things APIs, hosted by Marquetta. And we have a wonderful panel here today for this discussion with representatives from WISE, Mambu, and Iliad Solutions. So I'm going to bring them on to introduce themselves. So can we bring on Steve? Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve. I work at WISE, formerly TransferWise, and I look after our WISE platform product. So WISE is a global technology company which builds the best way to move money around the world so that it's instant, convenient, transparent, and eventually free. And we move $7 billion a month now on behalf of 10 million customers that use us at the moment. And WISE platform, it allows banks, businesses, and companies to tap into our infrastructure to offer their customers cross-border payments. So whether that's banks like Monzo or accounting software like Xero or Google Pay as well. And that's the product I look after.
Excellent. So Anthony, can you introduce yourselves, please?
Thanks, Liz. Anthony Walton. I'm the CEO of Iliad Solutions Limited. And Iliad build test tools, test platforms to help people prototype, test, certify any kind of payment system and increasingly financial messaging exchange systems. We operate globally around the world, some of the big brand names you may have heard. And we help people remove the friction from getting new payment technologies to market, and of course, making sure that all the new stuff works seamlessly as possible with all the old stuff.
Excellent. And last but not least, can you introduce yourself, Sneha, please?
Hi, thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. I'm Sneha. I'm the technical product manager for cards at Mambu. As you all know, Mambu is a cloud banking solution. And from the cards perspective, I'm responsible for evaluating technology vendors and building card issuing and processing connectors, which enables all our partner banks to better have better propositions for their customers. Prior to Mambu, I was a TPM at Visa and I worked in a few acquiring solutions like reconciliation and risk.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, as you know, this is a live celebration of APIs. We have a live audience. If you have, we are taking questions. If you have them, please put them in the comment section. I can't guarantee we'll get to all of them, but if you make them interesting and provocative, you have a better chance. But we have our own sets of questions that we can start off this discussion. And I'm really going to start off with a question for everyone. And so, we've been seeing the past 3 years, a lot of big trends and changes in banking due to open banking and open finance that have really been transforming financial services. How is everyone kind of using APIs to build products that were, unimaginable before we've had these changes? I really want to sort of hear some examples of what was unimaginable before and is now imaginable with our open banking, open finance environment. So I'm going to start with you, Steve.
Yeah, awesome. Open banking APIs, it's very cliched to say it's like the start of a long journey, still early in the journey, but it's definitely true, even though it's been around for a couple of years. It's been pretty awesome to see how much it's changed in that time. So open banking APIs we use to give our customers a faster and easier way to get money from their bank into Wise. So previously, that had to be a manual bank transfer. Customers had to leave Wise, go to their bank and send us money. But now with the magic of open banking in the UK and soon beyond, this means this can happen automatically. So customers don't need to leave Wise to get money to us. And we couldn't really do that until a year or so ago, when this really started taking off. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key parts of our mission is that cross-border payments should be instant and convenient. And open banking payments that take a few seconds to come from your bank to us solves speed, and it solves the convenience of not having to leave your bank to go and do that. So we're pretty excited about it. It's been pretty awesome so far. Lots of customers are very happy with it. There's still some ways to go with some of the APIs that are being provided. But it's exciting looking forwards as well. Things like variable recurring payments coming in next year have huge potential for for not just Wise, but the industry, right? The ability to put the power in customers' hands to set up flexible instructions to different providers to basically automate managing your money. So it's coming soon, we hope, but pretty exciting and super powerful. What can be built on that?
Excellent, very interesting. So, Anthony, I'd love to hear your views about what was once unimaginable and now is
unimaginable. Yeah, yeah. I've worked in payments a long time, 30 years now, and everything was very siloed back in the day. I worked in card payments, and even within card payments, you had acquirers, issuers, and open banking and open finance basically just opens the access to an awful lot more data sources, and they not necessarily pertain to the payment or the financial world. So I think one of the big examples is identification. If I can prove who I am and I can tell without anything being able to be disproved that you are who you are, then I can open a lot more transaction capabilities. If I can see your last 3 years bank accounts with permission, I can take a much bigger, better calculated risk on whether you're right for this kind of loan or mortgage or that kind of thing. And we're seeing it almost day to day now and emerging very quickly around real-time payments, not necessarily driven by open APIs, but certainly complemented by them. So in the UK, for example, if you want to send an immediate payment, a faster payment, there's a new feature now called the confirmation of payee, which just basically says these account details are this name to stop fraud and accidents. And just access to that information with the framework and the authorization capabilities and the tokens that allow you to do that is really the world of the open API. But once I get that information, I can do a lot more creative things with it. So, Steve just talking about transferring money internationally, being able to prove who the bank is, who you are, what your credit rating is, all that kind of good stuff that's not necessarily to do with the transaction, just opens a whole new world of transactions that we can support. So I think it's as much about, and it's a cliche to say it's about the data, but it really is, because with the supplemental, the additional data I can get, I can do an awful lot more.
No, it is really fascinating when you think about how people on the street look at payments, even international payments, and just how much has changed about what happens underneath and the type of data that wasn't available just only a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I wanted to move on to Sania to really get your views on what is now imaginable in our new open banking, open finance world.
I think open banking is actually kind of like leading to an API economy. And coming to what is unimaginable, I think the entire payment ecosystem present today is unimaginable. Because who would have really thought that, there will be banks without branches? But Mambu is powering some of these challenger banks. And who would have thought that you could actually get cards issued from institutions which are not really banks? But Marqeta does that, and it's not really a bank. So, there's like one institution which does the issuing, another one which is like checking fraud, something else is responsible for analytics. So, all these communications and interactions, these are basically built on APIs. And I think if they're not already built on APIs, they're migrating to that. So, I think it's really nice to see how APIs are empowering the entire payment ecosystem.
No, it's really fascinating. But I wanted to go into maybe some more sort of detailed questions with some of you. And Steve, I'm going to start with you because I really wanted to know about, how Wise is using APIs to build, some of these, new products for customers. Can you give us some details?
Yeah, definitely. One of the ways we use APIs is we expose our own APIs to partners for the Wise platform proposition, which I mentioned. So that allows these banks and businesses to use us. So we're live with 18 banks in 11 countries around the world and 7 different enterprise partners, and plugged into some of the core banking rails like Mambu as well, actually, who've already had a Wise integration connected. And all of this is powered our APIs, right? So this is a real opportunity for us, and definitely an opportunity for us to get closer to solving our mission. We know not everyone in the world is going to download our app and come to us directly. It's going to take a long time to convince 7 billion people to do that. So what we want to do is take the tools, the infrastructure, the stuff that we've built to where customers already are. So whether that's to their banks or to their business tools, right? And that's the fastest way we're going to achieve true money without borders, right? And we've built this product with our APIs. Cross-border payments are pretty hard, pretty complicated, and we've had 2,000 people working on this today now at Wise, and we've been building it for 10 years. So it's not something that's very easy for someone else to come and start building now. But if we have as we now have a single API that partners can access everything that we offer globally, they can use that to build their own end customer experiences, to solve their own customer problems in their own way. They don't have to be beholden to the design that we've come up with or the flow that we've come up with. And that's only really possible through the API that we've built and have shared with partners who can then use to build pretty incredible things on top of.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I wanted to see maybe if I could get a bit more detail from the rest of the panel about these steps to create an API strategy, specifically, looking at partners and having control over product development. I know that as Sneha, you mentioned, this API economy. What are some of the steps in an API strategy then?
So I think before anything, the first thing is you have to start with the why. Like, why do you even want to expose or digitalize your products? And does that align with your whole business model? So that's the first step. And once that's out of the way, I think the next part is to understand all the business cases and the functionality which is supported by these APIs. Is it end to end? And I say end to end because, APIs need to be comprehensive. You can't really expose APIs for like one chunk or one unit of your business and then not have the access to the rest of the business. So it should completely be a holistic solution. So that's one important aspect. And the next step is the technology and any development efforts. So, do you want to build it on your own? Are there technology vendors who are doing a fantastic job out there in the market? So do you want to buy these APIs? Like, this build was buy strategy is something you have to consider. And once that is in place, I think the last step is to actually have KPIs on these APIs because you want to know if they're actually performant and you want to know if they move your business metrics. So I think these are some of the steps to consider.
Very good. Yeah, no, so I wanted to go over to Anthony now about what are your views and some of the steps for an API strategy?
Yeah, I think it's changed very much over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, when we were going into kind of the tier one banks, they had a little dedicated team who knew about APIs, and they were very much on the outside of the business. They were the technical guys, the smart guys who were building these APIs, and it was quite distinct from the rest of the business. Obviously, they've gone more and more mainstream, and it's almost like a lot of the institutions are taking a bit of a step back and saying, okay, we had to move quick because we wanted to participate in this scheme, yeah, so we needed to do it. Or especially in Europe and the UK, we had to do this because of legislation. Open banking initiatives have to make our data available. We had to do it. And I think we're just at the start, and I don't like the word journey any more than Steve does, but I think we're just at the start now where people can say, okay, we kind of understand this technology. It's going more mainstream. A lot of our coders and testers understand APIs because they use it for DevOps and they use it for agile tooling and all that kind of good stuff. So now it's very much, as Sneha said, just going back to the use case. What do you need to do? And of course, traditionally, the players in our market had a full stack of products. The banks would have loans and credit cards and debit cards and bank accounts. And people like Wise and Mambu, to some extent, don't have to provide all that. And that can be driven very much through an API strategy because you can get access to data from other institutions. You can build really good, smart apps that function within a smaller ecosystem than you had to do when you had to have branches and all that kind of thing. So I think it's very much about the technologies established. As we were just saying, a lot of people offer solutions and adjunct parts to systems that allow you to build or buy. And the focus, I think, is very much saying, wait, what are we trying to do? Who are we trying to attract? Are we an organization that's trying to build its capability by consuming lots of different APIs? Or are we trying to broadcast our API because we want to do a real-time payment in a significantly large country, and we want to, in competition with other people who can move money around, be the best and the easiest to consume? So there's a lot of strategizing going on. There's a lot of people trying to hold their position, and there's a lot of people who are trying to get a slice of the cake for themselves. So it's a bit of a woolly answer, but I think there's an awful lot of introspection going on. Let's step back. This is a great technology. This is almost like you've got internet for the first time. Yeah, we can do much more with the assets we have as a financial organization than we ever could.
No, it's fascinating. I have to call you up on one thing. I love the word journey. I think journeys are all about progress and moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on X Factor.
No worries. I want to go back to Steve though, because I know I'm really glad you mentioned partnerships. How important have APIs been with Wise's partnership strategy? You partner with very sort of third-party platforms, large financial institutions, Mambu. Like how important has that been to that evolution? Can you give us a bit more detail?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to start with, it's worth remembering that APIs are just a tool to solve a problem. I think as Nate touched on this really well, to say what is the problem that you're trying to solve is the very first thing to answer, right? Now, you can have an amazing API, but if it doesn't solve a problem for your customers, it won't have been worth building, right? So that's always got to be the first step that we ask ourselves, and that anyone should. But in terms of partnerships with financial institutions, you mentioned, but APIs are one of the easiest ways and most secure ways to exchange the information needed to make these partnerships happen. There's other channels, there's other methods, but APIs are definitely one of the easiest and most secure ways to do that. They also let us build pretty exciting dynamic experiences. Right? There's a whole bunch of very tiny details that make Wise what Wise is. Telling customers exactly when the money's going to arrive, keeping them updated at every step of that process, what's going on, reaching out when we need more information, dynamically requesting some of that information up front. That level of dynamism is quite hard to do if you're not using an API. It's hard to hard code all those fields or use other tools. So they definitely help make an amazing end customer experience, right? That you wouldn't be able to get in some other ways. And I think it's interesting then why a bank or why a large business would want to even consider the problem to be solved, right? I think we all know here that the cross-border industry has been pretty broken for a while. Slow, inconvenient, non-transparent payments. And to Anthony's point a bit, banks have, I don't envy them, they have 5,000 products and this branch network and a ton of stuff to maintain. And they're going to focus on their core proposition, which banks are generally domestic. So it's going to be domestic banking, right? Your current accounts, loans, credit cards, mortgages, the core products of a bank. And the international banking experience is often something that needs to be offered, but is definitely not a core competency or a core feature. So rather than trying to invest in that, choose to invest in what your core competence is, what is you're really good at, what you're trying to differentiate on, and leverage partners for the other things. Right? So we can bring our specialism of cross-border payments with the scale of the banks, and that really can change things for the partners, their customers, and for Wise as well.
Yeah, no, interesting. I mean, the cross-border issue has been, I think it's in this week's issue of The Economist, and also the November issue of The Banker, small plug, so if you want to read more about cross-border payments. But I wanted to bring Anthony in on the partnership discussion, because Iliad is also, partnered with a wide range of financial institutions. What has been your experience with using APIs and working with partners?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed over the last 5 years significantly, and we got this maybe 10 years ago with XML-based messages, where it's the new kid in town. People are finding the feet, but what we're finding now is our customers are kind of split into two camps. Those who see the advantage of using, almost like a huge a la carte menu of APIs that can do all kinds of things through third parties, and then just have to make sure that they all work together and they have the latest versions and everything plays nicely together. But I think the biggest shift is being in how broadcast isn't probably quite the right term, but how the big schemes, how the big players are trying to get their APIs out there in competition with other ways of doing things. So TransferWise or Wise, sorry, great way of moving money around, but there are quite a few people who can move money around. And to my mind, there's a huge competitive advantage in making sure that your services, as differentiated as they may be, or as generic or as they may be, but the easier they are to consume and use, then the quicker you can drive revenue through them, the more likely you are to get a market advantage. And we're seeing customers who are simplifying their APIs, they're consolidating them, they're learning from their experiences. They're often still influenced by the big financial institutions who can only consume something in some way. And a lot of things we're talking around today would probably involve getting hold of a balance on an account, and that's probably not necessarily going to be in a microservice that you can call with an API. So that integration into their core business might determine, as stupid as it sounds, their partner for moving forward with an API or a money transfer system that they offer to their customers. So we're seeing a lot of kind of scratching of heads, a big acceleration. I mean, if you looked at some of the statistics around APIs 12 months ago, people were advertising we have a 93% reliability. 30 years ago, when I got into payments, it was 5 nines. It was 99.999. And already, very quickly, APIs are getting more robust. There's a lot of tools now to monitor them. There's a lot of tools to help you integrate them, to test them. So we're seeing a huge industry, if you like, rolling behind the innovators to support them through that.
Interesting. So, I wanted to move on to Mambu a bit. Mambu have what they call composable banking. So I wanted to ask Nina, what role do APIs play in this composable banking proposition at Mambu?
Sure. So Mambu is a composable banking platform. And what exactly does this mean? It just means that every functionality is like a Lego block. So, you can just stack up as many and then just combine, make any shape you want. So any block of functionality can be combined in any way you want. Okay. And this entire plug and play ecosystem is built on APIs. And like Steve has just mentioned, that APIs are very dynamic. So, they help. They're basically like messengers. They're running back and forth between all these Lego blocks, and then they're transferring data here and there, and they with the requests and responses and the right messages. So this really brings in a lot of flexibility of choice. Like you can really pick what you actually want. And today's banks are using this setup basically to support anything they want by just calling a couple of APIs instead of building it on their own. So this way, right, they can focus on their competitive advantage, whatever they'd like to offer, more than the actual building of everything in the background. So this is an important aspect. And the next advantage of composable banking and APIs is that it gives a faster time to market. From something which may take, say, a year to build, can even be just a plug and play of a couple of APIs and you have it in a couple of weeks. So, this speed is what everyone requires now because times are changing so fast. You can't really sit at home and build everything and just wait for everyone else to, just race past you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep, those days are over. Usually when people talk about APIs, the conversation over the past few years has been about the quality of them and what's on offer. So I wanted to go to Steve for this. What are some of the challenges you face when trying to consume APIs and kind of ensuring that those that you share are user-friendly and easy to integrate?
Yeah, so when I think about the APIs that we're building, for partners, what do we ask ourselves? The first question is always, does this solve a problem, or should we be working on something else? So making sure we're aligned with our customers, that we spent enough time talking to them to understand what their problem is and how this can help solve it. We then ask, how easy would this be for a partner to use in their product? So is it clear? Is it simple? We're not exposing loads of internal logic or terminology. Is it well documented? Can a partner kind of pick this up and self-serve? And we'll sometimes ask engineers within the company who don't work on our products just to take a look and say, would you understand this if you're looking at this for the first time? We then ask ourselves as well, is it flexible enough? Every partner's got a different use case, a different business. If we build our modular building blocks in a flexible enough way, they can build their own experiences on top. If we're very rigid in how it's structured, it makes it harder for them to decouple parts. So how flexible can this be for partners is something that we don't know every use case that we're going to encounter in the next 5 years. So the more flexible we build, the more likely we will be to solve that problem at the time. And then how easy is it? Oh, sorry, I was just going to say how easy is it to maintain as well is the other piece. Our product is dynamic. We launch new currencies, new payout methods. We don't want to have partners having to do more integration work every time we do that. Right? It's a pretty bad experience. It should be completely automatic, or at worst, a one-line config change, right? To add or remove features that we can offer. So we want to take as much complexity off partners so they can focus on their core product offerings. And we talk to partners a lot. We get a lot of feedback from their engineers. Every time we go live, we do a retro with partners' engineers to ask them, how was the experience? Where can we do better? Always trying to get the time it takes to integrate down. That's our kind of our core goal there. One day, can we get it live in one click would be the dream. Until then, how few lines of code does it take to integrate wise is kind of what we try to measure.
Yeah, no, yeah, the ease of implementation, that's kind of the key. Okay, kind of continuing on this sort of topic, I wanted to talk about standards, and finding of standards for APIs. So one of the great things about standards is that there are so many of them. So it's knowing that we have such a diverse landscape. I wanted to bring Anthony in on this discussion. How do you kind of navigate that diverse landscape?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges at the minute is that it's not just a standard. There are layers of standards. So if you're operating within Europe, you have to follow PSD2 rules for certain types of transactions that are executed via an API. If you want to do open banking, another set. If you want to do open authorization, you need a no-auth token. It's another level of standard. And I think, the glib answer is standards are very easy to define, but they're very hard to enforce. And again, there's never going to be there is an open banking standard, there are standards within that, but there's never going to be an overarching standard that says, if you follow this one set of rules from this one authority, you're covered. So it's almost, again, going back to the WISE business case, if you're moving money internationally, you might have to choose between two standards. Okay, you might have a legislation that you have to follow, but then within that you can say, this is just too hard. We're going to send money internationally that way. So there's definitely no shortage of standards, and this goes back again many years within payments and financial messaging generally. Do they ever stick? Not really. And again, sometimes the ones that are more flexible are more likely to evolve and survive than those that are rigidly implemented and enforced. And that sounds completely contradictory, but it's often back in the day, something like ISO 8583 that's no longer a standard anymore. It's still there as a framework. And I think it's going to be interesting to see in a world where you do have competing standards, which win out. And my view personally is that it'll be the one that's the most flexible, that doesn't involve having multiple versions all the time. I think Steve was just saying there, you should be able to add things without having a version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, because as soon as you, as a supplier, are supporting multiple standards, or as soon as your consumers are switching between the two, the much higher the likelihood of failure or inefficiencies creeping in. So I think it's a very simple, what about standards? But it's not a simple answer. There's a lot of standards. There's a lot of layers. And I think we'll probably see over the next couple of years which ones win out. I don't think there's a de facto standard that's winning across the board.
And then the standards graveyard as well. But that kind of leads me, I want to stay with you, that leads me to my next question about hybrid APIs, and how you're kind of working with banks to help integrate kind of old and new. How does that work?
Yeah. Again, going back to perhaps Steve's business case, moving money around has been increasingly dominated by ISO 222, an XML heavy format that's often referred to as the rails. But increasingly, we're seeing that those rails are being controlled by APIs. And that gives us a bit of a hybrid challenge from a testing and certification point of view, because you might see an element in a JSON string that has embedded an XML message for some of the data elements. And then the other way, so you might be collecting some information on an API and then bundling it into an ISO 222 message that gets transported, unpacked, deconstructed. So there's a lot of hybrid kind of messaging going in. I wouldn't call it APIs, but a lot of hybrid messaging going in. And we're also immediately seeing the impact now of things like protocol buffers from Google for asynchronous type streaming communication. So it's not just send this message, get one back. My phone's just kicked in when I said
It's okay.
it's the equivalent of the cat walking across the screen.
We are live.
Yeah, we are live. So yeah, already we see competing technologies with RESTful APIs. Again, and the three have to interact, the four have to interact, and they have to interact with the existing infrastructure. So it's very much a hybrid market at the moment. I know Mambu and Wise, you've got very clean technology stacks, but I'm guessing, and not putting words in your mouth, that there are times when you have to interact with the older world, and that's where the standards get kind of morphed a little bit, and that's where the hybrid comes in, and that's often where the integration challenge is.
Yeah, no, yeah, I see them nodding their heads. Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to Sneha right at the moment, because one of the things that is often talked about in the API world is creating a great developer experience. So, how does Mambu what are some of the criteria and processes you adopt to deliver that great developer experience?
Yeah, developers. So these are really the people who love to explore and are very hands-on. You ask them to sit and read documentation, they'll be like, no, thank you. So you really need to give them the access. You need to give them the product, allow them to explore, and then whatever, they may break it, but they'll fix it again. So, for the best developer experience, I really believe that, all our partners or whoever we partner with, I always ensure that, they have a sandbox available which has all the right simulations and it is rich in functionality. And if anything, it should be easy to get access to the sandbox. It shouldn't be bundled with a lot of contracts and negotiations just to be able to explore. So, I think this way devs can just log in and then they can just start exploring. And when they're stuck, that's actually when the whole documentation comes into the picture. And because they're actually looking for a particular problem to solve, so I really feel that the documentation should be very clear and concise. And most importantly, it should be generic. What I mean by that is anyone reading it should be able to understand it. It should not have very industry specific jargons or something which is too technical for anyone just reading it or giving a glance at it wouldn't understand. So documentation. And the next part is that SDKs. So one part of it is the API itself, but for a developer, it's also important to understand how to integrate these APIs into their everyday code. So having these wrappers around available in probably the most common languages, Java, Python, etc. This really helps them to easily just integrate into those APIs. And the more self-explanatory all these resources are, that just gives a better experience. And regardless of how much of all of this experience is like self-explanatory, I still feel that it's always good to have a human point of contact throughout the entire process, from the onboarding till the go live. Because if there's any question, you should always be able to get immediate technical support. So this way, I think having all of this in place really enhances the developer experience.
It's kind of refreshing to hear, even in a highly technical environment. It's always good to have less jargon and to have very simple environment. I think that that's true for so many areas of our life and work. But I want to talk a little bit about delivering better customer experiences, and I'm going to go to Steve for this. How have sort of real time and event driven APIs really helped Wise deliver on that customer experience?
Yeah, so if I think about some of the real-time event-driven APIs that deliver a customer experience that we expose to our platform, I touched on it earlier, I think, around things like our money tracker.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when you're sending money internationally, 40% of our payments are instant, but with some countries not having fully instant rails yet, that isn't 100%. We'll get there, but it will take a bit of time. So customers want to know where their money is, right? Having a way that we can expose that status information through to partners in real time that they can show to their customers so they can track the money from beginning to end is super powerful. You see others investing in similar experiences, right? Because that's clearly something that's pretty important to customers is knowing exactly where your money is. Yeah. We also solved this through a delivery estimate. So we've reverse engineered all the world's payment schemes to predict within an hour confidence window when your money will arrive at the other end. And that gets updated in real time based on all sorts of different factors, different cutoff times, which bank you're sending to and from. A hugely complex piece of logic that is exposed if you use Wise in one little number that says your money should arrive at this time. The only way to surface that, keep that accurate and update, is with real time in different event-driven APIs. Right? So a couple of examples of how we can help give customers confidence that they know when it's going to arrive and where it is, and if it's on track, or if there was some issue that we needed to look at something that might have held it up. And reduces their worry and reduces their contacts, right? They don't need to get in touch if you know exactly what's going on at any one point. So that's definitely something our partners and their customers appreciate.
I would say almost it's not just sort of a personalized product for customers. It's almost a personalized journey.
Exactly. Right. Like every single transfer is different. If you're sending from one country to another today and you're sending to a different place tomorrow, that experience might be different depending on the rails involved. So being able to not just customize the product, but customize every interaction with that product is very hard to do. But if we can simplify that down to just one very simple number for partners and their customers, that's pretty powerful.
Excellent. I wanted to bring Anthony in on this sort of customer experience conversation on using real-time and event-driven APIs. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're seeing more of our customers investing in that, and it's not necessarily that it has to be real-time, but it has to be event-driven, as Steve's just explained. You need to know where you are in the process, and a lot of traditional money transfer systems have just been fire and forget. The money's on its way, take up to 5 days. And people are pulling their hair out and they're making phone calls and they're checking with the bank and they're checking with a friend's bank continually. So the more event-driven, and there's a lot of new technology now with the APIs that are event-driven, a lot of the cloud stuff enables this a lot easier. I know we're working with AWS and an awful lot of event-driven things now that we can even use internally. And I think it just builds a much better user experience for your customers. And, customers are not necessarily just selecting the cheapest way. It's the way in which they feel more comfortable. And, stupid outside of our world, if I order a pizza, I don't want to know the pizza's going to come in the next hour. I want the little thing that says it's in the kitchen. It's on the bike. The bike's at the end of your street. And on a much sort of bigger scale, I think that's where a lot of the financial institutions are trying to go. And of course, the best kind of use of APIs is within that little world of the app, isn't it? If I'm sending you, Liz, half the cost of dinner on Thursday night, I want to know that the money's going to you. I want to know ideally that you've got it. I want the experience within a real-time bubble as much as I can get. And we see a lot of investment now, especially with the big tier one banks and the card schemes, trying to drip that information all the way through to many kind of sequences.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of, looking at some of these public forums, and open banking has been talked about a lot on forums like this throughout the years. I wanted to bring Sneha into this conversation. Mambu have a series called Disruption Diaries, which is very much about raising more awareness about what open banking is and open finance. How do we demonstrate the benefits of open banking to the wider public?
So basically, open banking is when you're trying to enable other banks or third parties to build more customer centric solutions or anything which is anything related to finance, but it's more customer centric. So that way, the customers are also in full control of their data. That is, either they can give access or they cannot give access. So, it's completely up to them. So their data is secure, but you're still building customer centric solutions. So the benefit of this can only be demonstrated through the customer journey itself, because what better to help people understand than the experience, than them actually experiencing this innovation. Because when you have, say, cross border payments, and today it just happens with a click. When you want to just get finance, today you can get a virtual card issued at a POS terminal and immediately be able to finance it. So, all of these are examples of integrated banking at work. And we just need to acknowledge these experiences. And that's when we associate them to open banking and integrated banking, that's when we understand that, all of this innovation is in play. It's not something which is separately demonstrable. It's just the customer journey here, which plays a very key role.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Steve for a bit of a bonus question, because I think you mentioned this in one of your earlier answers, or sort of alluded to it. There's been a lot of interest recently in sort of low code or no code APIs. What is the future for this for APIs? And what benefit does low code or no code have for businesses? What do you think,
I
Steve?
think it ties. You're on mute. The saying of 2020. Look, low code, no code APIs tie back quite strongly to that speed and ease of implementation. So if you think of this API is just there to solve this problem, to exchange data in this way. Anything that speeds that up and makes it easier is super welcome, right? To Anthony's point earlier, as banks are making huge investments in their tech platforms, and some of the older corporates as well are really upgrading. So as that happens more and happens faster, which it truly is, it will be easier for newer systems to talk to each other using whether it's simpler standards, simpler APIs, or more modern technologies that enable more low code or no code communication, more third-party orchestration tools, perhaps, that can plug things together. So super exciting. I don't know what it will bring in future, but we've already seen some of our more modern partners, or partners on more modern tech stacks, I should say, really find it much more straightforward to build against what we've built, by not having to write everything in COBOL in some freezer cooled room, but to be able to do it in a much lighter way.
Poor Cobalt. It's not the first time I've heard that mentioned this week. But I saw Tania, I saw you nodding your head a bit to what Steve was saying. Do you have any viewpoints about the future of no code and low code?
Yeah, sure. So I think as Mambu, like all our orchestration layers are these low code platforms, and any APIs built on them are these low code APIs, right? So what essentially happens is when you're trying to build something, you build it once and it's reusable. So, you just build once and you deploy everywhere. That's the kind of model you generally follow with these low code platforms. And that gives a lot of speed, and you can really scale and grow exponentially. There's no stopping you. You want to spring something up in Europe, go ahead. US, go ahead. Australia, go ahead. It's just like, a plug and play. You're just trying to reuse everything. And that is from a business perspective. And coming from a technology or support perspective, right, everything's really visual. So if you run into any issues, you can just pull up the diagram, see what's happening, and then the flow is all very clear. It's all visual. So any debugging, maintenance, changes, everything's very easy. So this also makes the team feel they're very productive, and it really helps make a sustainable development kind of an environment.
Mm, interesting. Now, so before I move over to Anthony to see if he has a comment on low code and no code, I just wanted to remind the audience that there is still a few more minutes to put in any questions if you have it. If not, all the questions will come from me. So just a warning as we come to the last 50 minutes of this webcast. But Anthony, do you have any views on the
Yeah, yeah. My experience of low code is behind low code, there's an awful lot of code going on to make it look like it's low code. Because if I want to send, I have a very simple function, send money from account A to account B internationally, yeah? Banks in different countries have different account numbers, sort codes, bank like cells, whatever, yeah? But yeah, I completely get the point. And it's almost like an architectural argument about microservices. And the more discrete the service, the cleaner, the lower code the API can be. But what that does do is it shifts a lot of the functionality into a cascade of API calls or a complex orchestration. So, of course, everybody wants to make their APIs consumable, but that can sometimes shift some of that logical liability onto the people consuming them, because they have to say, okay, this is a really clean low-code API, but in order that I can call it, I have to do a number of checks. And that generally, it might be an AML check, it might be a KYC check, it might be a microservice, it might be a call to a backend system to get a balance, for example, which then populates the lovely new technology message in the low-code API. So it's great to get your message out there and to be more competitive. I think the problem is with the institutions that do more than just consume a small number of services, it can in some ways give them more of a headache because they have to orchestrate, they have to recover, they have to do all the things you have to do, almost as if it was an internal system. What happens if it's not available? The stupid things, what happens if it replies twice? I get half a message. So the more discrete the microservice, often the harder the integration is if you want to maintain that very, very high level availability. So
interesting.
Yeah, nothing's free, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Nothing's, but also I kind of like what you said before. There's a lot of code behind no code. I'll try to remember that. So we're coming to the last 10 minutes of our discussion. So I'm going to ask everyone kind of a final question. There's a lot of sort of like testing with APIs and criteria you measure against, but really I wanted each of the panelists to think about their work with APIs and advice you would give others to avoid pitfalls when evaluating a platform's technology. So, Steve, Sania, I'm gonna start with you. What is some advice you would give?
Okay, so I think with open banking, integrated banking, and all of this becoming more and more common, right? So APIs and resources are basically becoming publicly available. And this really brings API management into the picture. So, how do we manage the resources in the backend? Like, API utilization of one customer should not really impact the performance of APIs for any other customer. So, the resource management here is very important. And the next one I'd like to probably mention is that, when it comes to payments, right, or in fact, banking, everything's very well regulated. So it's also important to ensure that, the APIs we work with are follow the right security standards. Security is a key requirement, both when the data is transacting between systems and when it's with the systems itself. So, I think security and management is something I'd like people to look out for.
Excellent. Well done. So Anthony, I'm looking for your
Okay.
advice now for some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, I think, Sneha just touched on that. What we're talking about are highly secure APIs. They're not turning your lights on and off in your kitchen from your smartphone. They're moving money internationally. And of course, they have to be as secure as they possibly can. What I think we've learned over our time working with them is the more transparency you can build into how you integrate them, how you test them, how you certify, the better. And it sounds almost glib that the first message I can get end to end, I'm kind of 99% of the way through my testing because I've had to get a certificate. I've had to register for open banking in the UK. I've got to be able to consume their API to get a directory listing. I've then got to get a token. I've then got to exchange that token and encrypt it perhaps to go through one of the other rails. So there's an awful lot of technical stuff going on in parallel. And the more transparency you can bring to that, and to Sneha's point again about having really good sandboxes, sandboxes that are not necessarily this kind of works, they're incredibly fully functional. And the engineer at one side trying to consume it through a browser, for example, sees what you see at your end. So you can say, okay, there's a comma and a space. There shouldn't be a space. And I can't see the space. And you go, well, you can. It's there. If you look at a hex dump, and the quicker you can get that interaction, and it is very much trying to mimic having somebody else on the other side of the phone. And there's obviously better ways of doing it these days. But the more transparency, the more that you can see that they can see, the quicker your APIs can be consumed. And the quicker you can see that the APIs that you are consuming are working as well as you expect them to do. And one of the things we haven't really talked about is monitoring and performance. And that kind of then overlaps with all the great functions we get out of the cloud and containers and all that kind of stuff. And there's millions of copies and all this. If you get a breakdown in one of those core components, you need to know very quick and reroute or recover. We saw something very similar with some of the big social media companies a couple of weeks ago. You can have a dependence on a very small piece of technology that can just take you out of business. And that non-functional aspect to the solution is increasingly important because if I want to move money to somebody in the USA, I can probably choose 3 or 4 people. If I have a bad experience, I remember that. The media in the UK, the BBC loves payment failures from banks or whatever. It's usually the breaking news on the 6 o'clock news. I'm thinking, is that really the most important thing that's happened today? But it gets so much publicity. And of course, if you're competitive and you're trying to disrupt someone because your way of moving money is quicker or the way you can issue cards is quicker, people have got long memories and bad experiences can come back and bite you. And that's generally the non-functional aspect rather than the functional aspect.
No, fascinating, really good. So, Steve, can you bring us home with your advice for combating some of the pitfalls?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with one of Anthony's point, a very tactical one, like test before writing code, like play in the sandbox, run it in Postman, run a bunch of calls. Do the responses come through as the docs say they're going to come through? To Anthony's point, is kind of the uptime, the latency, these things, are they running about as expected, right? No, Sandbox won't ever be a replica of production 100%, but is this working as it says it will? Is it working as it should be? Before committing loads of engineering time to write lots of code. We've definitely done that in the past when we've consumed APIs, and it's paid off a lot to find some of the bigger issues. But a bit more strategically, like when thinking about working with someone, like, is this thing going to allow me to save time and resources to focus on my core product or service? Is this going to allow me to get to market faster or be more flexible or give a better solution? Is still the ultimate question, whether it's an API product or not. If yes, this is something we should look more at. If no, probably worth considering something else. And just lastly, like, it is more than just the technology. You've got to look at the team, the service, the flexibility, the trust in the relationship. like these things probably determine success more than the tech a lot of the time, if not just as much. So does this this non-functional stuff, as Anthony phrased it, come together with the tech as well? If yes, you're onto a winner. If not, it might be worth thinking about some other solutions.
Excellent. Well, that's been a lot to think about here in our 55 minutes of celebrating APIs. I wanted to thank all three of you for a very interesting discussion, and thank Marketa for hosting us. And there will be so they'll be, I think it'll be available on demand to watch as well after we finish. But I wanted to thank Steve and Anthony and Siha. We appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.